or things
we
like
really
that.
are. Don't let Kathy distract you. We are.
What?
All right, we've got Cody Weaver.
to?
We've got Cody Weaver this morning joining us. Of course, we split the segment. We're back with Cody. We're talking critical race theory. All right, Cody, we've opened the bag. We've talked about what it is, what they're saying about it. Dude, what are they doing?
What are they doing? That's a great question. I'm going to skip to some of the stuff that I learned in the conclusion chapter. And so, you got to ask, there's a lot of things they're trying to do. They're focused also on class. And so it's not all about race. There's actually a parable or story that they offer, and they say, what if the perfect training was offered that eradicated racism? Racism is gone. We're now in a post-racial society. And then the question at the end of that is, would people of color be any better off? And so,
interesting, okay.
And so what that leads to and what they're showing is that even if racism was gone, that there's still going to be this classism. And they talk about some things that are historically accurate and true. And that's one of the interesting things about the critical race theory. They take things from history that are absolutely true. There's nuggets of truth in here, absolutely. Right. It's the end result and call to action and their radical conclusions that are the problem. And so that's why when you say you're against critical race theory and somebody says you're a racist, and say, no, I'm not against the history. We need to teach history of Jim Crow. We need to teach history of slavery. That's part of our history.
All the Holocaust, that stuff, absolutely.
There was a time in America where the judicial system was institutionally racist. We had racist laws. Absolutely.
Well, and I'm not opposed, Cody, from turning around and teaching it from the perspective of a young black person growing up during that time frame.
Right. Like Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Booker T. Washington.
Absolutely. Yep. I have no problem with that framework.
But I don't really care for Nicole Hannah-Jones' opinion of something she wasn't there to experience 200 years ago, but she thinks her opinion's more important than Frederick Douglass.
Right.
That to me, that's not educating students. It's the difference between teaching critical thinking and teaching them what to think versus how to think.
Yes.
And so this material and what critical race theory does, it's teaching them what to think. There is no critical race theory. Here is the answer. And if your essay does not include a component, a racial component, then you've done it wrong, because everything in America is about race. Every problem includes a racial component. And so if you don't have that, then you're going to get dinged points. That's a problem.
Well, and I have a problem as a mom and as a former teacher. I would have a really hard time grading that way. And then basically I'm telling, okay, put this, this, and this in your paper, and then I'm going to give you this grade, instead of saying, hey, think for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and for me, when it comes to the students, I think there's, when we talk about this, there needs to be a detachment from the students and the teachers. If a teacher or if a student is learning something at home, if their parents are a little more left-leaning, or even if their parents are socialists, and they teach that at home, and they learn Leninist, Marxist ideology, and they put together a very coherent essay and make a really good argument, I think that they probably deserve an A+ on that paper if they wrote an A+ paper. The same being said of a student that comes from a much more conservative background and writes something that follows our founding principles. If it's a coherent argument and it meets the prompt of the essay, they should get a good grade. It's when a teacher teaches with bias that we have the problem. You do get bias at home. I mean, I've talked to rabbis and priests and other people at private schools, and they say, we get paid to teach with bias at Jewish day school. We get paid to teach with bias at Catholic school. Yeah. Teachers get paid to not teach with bias.
Right.
And so that's where parents get, nervous. So one of the things I want to touch on critical race theory, they say that they will need to clarify the relationship between race and class as separate but overlapping vectors of disadvantage. And also that above all, they will need to marshal every conceivable argument, exploit every chink, crack, and glimmer of interest convergence, I'll touch on that in a second, to make these reforms palatable to a majority that only at a few times in history has seen it fit to tolerate them. Then they will need to assure through appropriate legislation and other structural measures that the reforms cannot easily be undone. This may necessitate making connections with counterparts in foreign countries. So we're talking about giving away our sovereignty to create laws that are really unconstitutional, that go against our founding principles and values, and they know they need to exploit different aspects. And so one of the key themes of critical race theory is Dr. Derek Bell's interest convergence theory. And what that says is the only time that people of color have advanced or seen any progress in America is when it aligned with the interest of white elites. No other times. And they use Brown versus Board of Education as an example.
Yeah,
But of course they do.
that's what came to mind.
And of course they do.
There's no altruism.
And then some of the stuff
Yeah,
you're talking about,
no.
some of the stuff you're talking about, Cody, right now, and we've talked about this, JP and I've talked about this for, the past 2 years on the show at least, that being patriotic is like, that's a bad thing now. So to me, some of this, again, takes away from that patriotism. I grew up in the, in the 70s. I remember to this day, one of my favorite commercials, the bicentennial, the 1976 Coca-Cola commercial, and everybody was in red, white, and blue, and there was Uncle Sam and Betsy Ross, and everybody's cheering, and everything's, happy, and it's all red, white, and blue, and American flags, and people from all walks of life, all ages, all colors, all religions were in this commercial, and it was a good thing to have pride for your country. Mm-hmm. Well, my goodness, does that just literally teach it out of schools?
Yeah, well, and this is where that big disconnect comes, because I hate when they deliberately say critical race theory that they are a departure from classical liberalism or liberalism in general, and so a lot of my Democrat friends are more liberal or subscribe to liberalism, which includes a neutral standard of the Constitution and objective standards of merit, these things that society all agrees on, and CRT is a departure from that. And so knowing what it is, recognizing it's one of the hardest things, because they make it intentionally malleable, and they even say, and I'll read this line later, that people progress it and don't even know they're doing it, and that's the beauty of what they're doing. They've already integrated so much
that agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's already there. And I wanted to touch on the subjectivity aspect that we're talking about, because I wanted to take it to its logical conclusion. And so when you have this subjectivity, and it's just, objectivity is what we all agree on, you take that to natural law. Now, natural law is natural law because God created nature, and we can observe nature. And during the Enlightenment, that's what we did. We observed nature, science grew, understanding grew, and so we have these Enlightenment philosophies and principles. If natural law is no longer objective, and it's subjective, God doesn't exist. And so their notion of objectivity is anti-God.
Well, this is where I was getting ready to go. What this really comes down to, and what I'm reading and understanding, is this is a modern day form of Leninism and Stalinism, is what it really is. And it's this impressionist approach to this communist theory that's really transforming into, well, it's race, not politic. That's the edge of the problem. But the push, when you read what they're doing, when you read the worksheets that are out there, like I went on and read a series of worksheets being put out by middle school teachers.
Okay.
It's not about race. It's about a beatdown over and over again on a certain political approach to how we want these children to think as they get out of high school. And again, I go back to how Lenin did his. How did Lenin spread so quickly back in the day? Literature through schools.
Oh, propaganda. Yeah.
Right. And so that's my biggest issue with it, number one. Number two is it comes back to what Cody said a minute ago. It all comes down to classism. It really does. All of this other stuff is noise. It comes down to the 10% of the people in this world that own 90% of the resources
and that are running it
not
all.
going to allow that control to go away.
And they have a lot to say about that 10%.
Oh, I'm sure they do. But it doesn't matter. That 10% is what is allowing them to do this, to keep things shaken up, so nobody focuses on the redistribution appropriately through a competitive market, through one being able to fight its way up the ladder of marketing or of capitalism or of entrepreneurship or saving your money and climbing that financial ladder.
Well, and the irony of that, there's big attacks on capitalism and what they call hypercapitalism in this, and I'm like, I've never heard of hypercapitalism.
What's that?
Well, it's a Marxist term.
Oh, it very much so.
It's a Marxist.
There we go.
When I looked at it,
there
I'm like,
it is.
Well, and it was like, that's not my opinion. When I went to look up that word, and I'm like, I don't know that word. What is that?
What is it?
It's a Marxist term.
So hypercapitalism has flourished in China. So, you take a communist.
How's that working for communist China? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
surprisingly well, actually.
When you have authoritarian control and then also free market,
What they
not
call
free market.
what they call free
I was
market.
going to say, yeah.
The
it's not,
hypercapitalism
though.
comes out of that,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not a free market at all.
No.
And so what they've done is they've taken this authoritarian government and they've linked it to what they're calling free market, which is nothing more than them professing hypercapitalism controlled by them. Again, the Red Bank of China is controlled by the government.
Oh, yes.
Well, and I would say, because we're talking about these themes, the Leninists, the Marxists, if you just look at the covers of the books, just looking at the branding. So this first one is white, black, and red, very reminiscent of the Nazi flag. I'm a Jew.
Oh, absolutely.
I know what a Nazi flag looks
right.
like. You go to How to Be an Anti-Racist, and it's got kind of this washed out brush stuff. It's got the black, yellow, red, and then you get to Derek Bell faces at the bottom of the well, black, white, and red, kind of fascist looking. Then you get to Foundations of Critical Race Theory.
Bring
in
me the
Education.
sickle, baby.
Hammer and sickle right here. This is the
Bring me the
USSR right here,
sickle.
and then you have Critical Race Theory, the key writings that form the movement. Black, white,
Black,
red.
white, red,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if they just ran out of colors or what was going on with the
The
printer.
messaging is clear.
The messaging is clear. They're not
Well,
hiding
and
the ball.
again, and
You
so-
just have to read the books.
And
Right.
again, it goes back to, it looks like, and we recommend the crew. We'd love to hear. I mean, everybody's putting their opinions out here. This is basic propaganda, and what's scary is we've already got a generation of kids who literally go to social media, whatever they're TikTok, Twitter, whatever the Instagram, wherever they get it every morning, and they know what they're going to be upset about. It's like we've raised these robots. I'm going to be mad about this today. Well, then this feeds into this, and my concern, especially, as a former teacher and as a mom, where are we teaching people to think for themselves? It's okay if I don't agree with you and I don't agree with you. It actually makes it fun when JP and I don't agree.
Right.
So because we're free thinker, we are able to think on our own.
Or
Because
just loud mouth. one of the two.
well, both probably.
Yeah.
But again, so what happens? Do you raise a society of basically robots who get their marching orders from social media at the beginning of the day, and it's the just elite, it's just the top of the food chain that gets to push that down their throats because, well, we've had, how many people have hopped on our feed today and said, did y'all not start until 8:25 because I
Right.
didn't get a notification?
Or again, we're being shadowed.
Yeah, so
But here-
it's scary.
but here's
It's
the thing,
happening.
And Cody, I'm going to steal your thunder for a second.
Please.
Because I'm older than you and I lose my mind.
No, please.
right? So, but Kathy, it's not about at all an organized, get into a line. This isn't a utopian push.
Oh gosh, no, that's
So
what I'm
that-
saying. This
that's
is a bad push.
but
This
that's
is not a
but
utopian
lining
society.
up everybody doing the only thing. Gattaca is the movie I was thinking of. That's more of a utopian push, right? That's
This is Animal Farm.
well, but or worse. And what I mean by that is this: they need everything to be gray in the regular person's life. They want it to be cold, standing in line, relying on the government to hand out a sack of potatoes, a roll of toilet paper, and your basic needs, and that's all you get. And
Pandemic's done this to us too.
they want that chaos. They want that discomfort. They want people to be upset with
They
each
want
other
fear.
about their plight
Yes,
in life.
yeah.
Because they want them to rely on that 10%.
Yeah.
Well, they want them to rely on the government too, because that's who that
Yes.
10% is going to be.
Yep.
But absolutely.
Yep.
God is gone, and you rely on the government, and the government's all that can give you.
And the government's the end all be all
Absolutely.
for you.
Well,
yes.
And so I wanted to say on, what are they saying in terms of their own notion of critical race theory? And they say that it's already embedded. It's embedded itself so thoroughly in academic scholarship and teaching that its precepts become commonplace, part of the conventional wisdom. And they said this may, and in fact, is already happening. And it says, consider how many disciplines, scholars, teachers, and courses profess almost incidentally to embrace critical race theory. And then consider how many influential commentators, journalists, and books develop critical themes while hardly mentioning their origins in critical thought.
Yeah. And that's where it comes from. And I was going to take this one step further. Cody, you mentioned, hey, I'm a Jew. I know what a Nazi flag looks like, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's folding over into what looks like an Israeli-Palestinian issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is Palestine and Israel right here. Critical race
we should
theory.
we should be very concerned, and we should be very aware of this. That's why I really appreciated at your meeting yesterday, or it was a discussion. It was just a great discussion, and at the end, a gentleman said, at the end of the day, CRT, bullying, all the different issues you touched on, which was a ton of issues yesterday, he said this all comes down to inclusion. He said, and you know what? We've just got to figure a way to work together, even though we don't all agree on everything. We come from different walks of life. And I thought, wow, now that's powerful, because there were people who did not agree in that room with you or with me or with each other, but everybody had the common goal of doing what's right for our greatest resource, which is our kids.
Well, and one of the people that did not agree at the end was saying, well, we need to call it something else because critical race theory, that's got too much. And it's like, yes, we do. We need to come together and talk about what we agree with and then call it something else because critical race theory is not the thing.
Yeah.
It's just not. And to have them show up in opposition, and then it started as a debate, it ended as a conversation with many people contributing, and it could not have gone any better. It's the type of conversation that we need to have in our communities, which is why I put the event on in the first place, and I want to make it monthly. I want my opposition to come because I want to have those conversations, and either I'll learn something and I'll change, or they'll learn something and they'll change.
And they don't have to be your opposition.
Absolutely. They don't have to be.
And again, because at the end of the day, everybody who was sitting in that room was all about the kids and our future and us working together. And when you come together, you are going to solve them. You're going to have issues that solve bullying. You're going to have issues that solve racism. But you have to talk and have the conversation like you started yesterday.
Opposition or not, you're still my neighbor. We still have to share a community.
Well,
Absolutely.
And again, we want all of the opposition because that's the only way the marketplace of ideas grow.
Yes.
And I've argued this. See, it's funny. People have criticized me for putting stuff out by meme, like on voting and police, and they get upset, and I said, why? You've just contributed to the marketplace. Without contributing to the marketplace doesn't grow. Right. And aren't we supposed to all be about the marketplace of ideas, whether we agree with them or not, so that those ideas can be out there and we can grow the intellect of our community and still continue to move forward, unlike places in South America that have not, that have gone backwards? Really? Come on, help me out. Don't have time to develop the idea of Palestine, Israel, but where I was going with that is that with the way critical race theory is being pushed down our throats, it's going to create a divide as divided as Israel and Palestine. And it's
we don't want to move
else.
backwards in society. We've gone too far. We've fought too hard. We don't want to move backwards. We want to move forward and work together. And that was what everything's all about.
Netanyahu, let him come over and take care of business.
Well, yeah, and we suggest, and we're going to have Cody on again because this is such a big topic. Would also, like to get your opinion on bullying, talk about some of the ideas that came out of the meeting yesterday. How do people find about Coffee with Cody, and how do they follow you on social media?
I'm on Facebook. Facebook, it's just if you type in Cody Weaver, it's my public figure page, and it's got a little cartoon vector of me. And then if you're on Instagram, I believe it's Cody Weaver, PISD7.
Excellent.
All right.
Excellent.
Cody, thanks so much for coming out and joining us this morning.
Yeah, good stuff.
Man, we appreciate you.
We got to get this guy reelected. Hey, so
Mrs. Weaver, thanks for giving birth to this one. Yeah. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. I love that.
She's done real well with all her kids.
He's like, hey, Dad was a part of that. All right, everybody have a blessed day. Come back on Friday. We're going to, because little Carter and I are hanging out, we're going to start testing some of this safety stuff with cars and old stuff.
I seriously had it.
I'm going to have fun with this.
Oh, my goodness. We were sitting